Hello and welcome to EDA Summit 2021, the first and only virtual conference dedicated to helping organizations like yours understand and implement event-driven architectures, or EDA. My name is Mark Jeffries. I'm delighted to be your host, your moderator for today. You know, this is actually what I do for a living. I host and moderate conferences normally all over the world, but for obvious reasons, over the last, 14 months, I've been confined to quarters here in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm actually in my basement at home. Didn't start this way, by the way. Given that we're spending some time together, here's my very brief backstory. I actually started as a stockbroker, got bored of that after a while, moved seamlessly into hosting television programs in the United Kingdom. I actually specialised in TV shows that nobody ever watched, but it was fine because I would meet all of these fabulous interviewees, these executives who would lean forward at the commercial break, give me their business card and say, "Mark, would you come and do the same thing at our live corporate event?" So I tried that out, fell in love with the live experience, left television behind, nobody noticed. Fast forward 25 years, that is how I'm lucky enough to be in front of you right now. So throughout today, you're going to hear how enterprises across virtually every industry are using EDA to underpin their digital transformations. And depending on the track, you'll get the business or technology side of the story. All of our sessions have a chat box below where you can comment or ask questions, so please feel free to do so. Let's practice. Tell us where you're joining from and we will chat back. Yes, we will. By the way, for obvious reasons, we'd much rather be doing this in person, but we still have to keep our social distance. However, you can actually recreate the wonders of the hotel or meeting ballroom in the comfort of your own home. Here's two ways of doing it. Okay, the first version, go to your thermostat in your house and turn it down as low as it can go, like really freezing. I want people shivering in your house. And then once we've actually started, which of course we have, go and pump it up to the max. Make it insanely hot. See? Just like being in a ballroom instead of at home. The other thing you can do is get all of the spare seats and chairs in your house and put them really close to your legs on either side. Get that claustrophobic feeling. See, once again, recreating that meeting space in the comfort of your own home. You know, it's been a most unusual year, and as we've all had to work from home, but in doing so, we've learned and experienced very new things and rather interesting events. Before we go any further, and just for fun, here is my whirlwind tour now of a year working from home. It began in March 2020 and I got home, put the liquids bag and my carry-on away for what has now been more than a year. At first, it was tough to get used to. Do your business! But I found ways to cope. I got half decent at that, and we also perfected this. While at home with the family, I've been doing my bit for the environment. That's right, recycling more empty bottles of alcohol than ever before. Given that 2020 was all about the pivot, I did my best to turn the basement into a green screen studio, allowing me to follow basement event dress code. We caved and I got one of these. It's already making me feel so much fitter. So there you go. That's what I've done with over a year of working from home, but I still haven't found time to sort out that sock drawer. Ah, those socks. It'll never happen. All right, back to EDA. Over the next 45 minutes, we will cover what are events, what is an event-driven architecture, why it matters more now than it ever has, how it intersects with iPaaS and API management, and where it's all going. Joining me will be leaders from Gartner, SAP, Software AG, Google, Boomi, Solace, RBC, Renault Digital, Slack, Steam, Vodafone, Roche, and Excel Axiata. Now, before I kick the keynote off, I would like to thank our sponsors. A special thank you to our platinum sponsors, Accenture, BCC Group, Boomi, Accedian, and Solace. And to our gold sponsors, SAP, Software AG, SL Software, ThinkPort, Link, and Wipro. Be sure to visit them in the exhibit hall to learn more about their EDA solutions and services, and I'm sure you'll score some incredible swag as well. Oh, and speaking of swag, check out our Game On section to see how you can earn points throughout the conference so you can choose some fun virtual gifts at the end of the event. All right, well, let's start at the beginning with the basics. What are events, and why do they matter anyway? Well, to explain that and more, I'm joined by the CMO at Solace, Michelle Malot. Michelle, over to you.
So I'll take it back to the very beginning and be very simple with this. So what are events? Look, events are potentially anything that happens across a business. Some of them are obvious to people, but some not so much. So first, think about a ship slowing down. That's an event. Think about a cargo container on that ship heating up. That's an event. Or a car crossing a bridge, changing its GPS location. That's an event. Think about someone placing an online order. That's an easy event for people to understand. Think about an escalator, though, stopping because its motor just failed. That is also an event. And these events that I've talked about and thousands more are potentially extremely valuable to a business if they can be captured and utilized. So let's look at these scenarios again. So the escalator scenario. So imagine if a motor failed event could be dispatched to the company that maintains that escalator. They could then see if a technician is available, see if they're in the area, and dispatch them immediately to the location to fix the escalator. That would be hugely valuable to the customer satisfaction of the company that owns that escalator. Now, let's go to the retail scenario. This is a simple one. Now, imagine a retailer receives an order, they place that the customers place, they check for inventory is there, they check the credit, the order gets placed and the customer's happy. Very simple scenario. But imagine if it was an omni-channel retailer and that product that that person actually ordered wasn't actually in an inventory warehouse, distribution warehouse, it was actually in a store. It was a pair of jeans on a shelf. Now imagine a scenario where that product gets sold by the store before it can actually get to the warehouse. And that's happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to many of you. And the reason it happens is because often no event goes from the inventory system to the retailer that has the store with a pair of jeans. Because these systems are disconnected, they're often batched, they have to update, and by the time the word gets to the store, they could or could not have sold that inventory. The result is an extremely disappointed customer and a dramatic lowering of their satisfaction. Now, let's look at our last scenario again. That's the ship. Now, imagine if that ship captain could receive a port congested event. That captain could then decide, whoa, I'm going to slow down my ship. That way I'm going to time my speed so that I can arrive at port when it's not as crowded. What will that do? Well, one, it'll prevent them from having to idle in port waiting for their turn. It will prevent them from unloading goods at a very crowded port that can't be moved beyond the port, and that will then occur demurrage charges. So huge value for that event. And look, events are not limited to a handful of industries anymore. It used to be just financial services and a handful of other industries. Events are useful to virtually every industry. Financial services, pharma, telco, energy, healthcare, you name it, every industry has thousands, not hundreds, thousands of events that could be adding huge value to their business if they could use them.
And for all of those use cases, clearly timing has to be an important factor, right, Michelle? What is the need for speed here?
No, Mark, you are bang on. Timing is not just important, timing is literally everything when it comes to events. This Gartner shot slide that I'm showing now really tells that story beautifully. The value in an event diminishes dramatically, not over weeks or months, over seconds. And in some industry, it's sub milliseconds where the value diminishes. And the value goes from being potentially altering to the company in terms of satisfaction or operational efficiency to one where they can really only use it for historical analysis. So time value of events is critical. So to summarize the event story, there are events firing all over your organization all the time. Your ability to get those events in motion from where they're occurring to where they can actually be useful will dictate your future success. And companies that do this well will improve their operational efficiency. They'll reduce their costs, like in the scenario of the ship. They'll improve their satisfaction, like in the scenario of the retail. And they'll be able to innovate. So that's the 101 on events, Mark.
All right, so if I'm understanding, I'm getting that events can potentially be anything you can track digitally, and my head's spinning now on all the potential use cases for this. Speaking to the applicability of events and event-driven patterns across industries, I did have a chance earlier to catch up with some of the business leaders who were speaking at this conference, and I asked them about the benefits they're hoping to achieve by leveraging events. Here is their take.
So for us, the value of EDA, I see that from a customer context, which it allows our customers to earn through EDA to surface critical events that need human attention into Slack so that they can act.
Is real-time loyalty points. Second one is improve our customer experience. And the third one is 100% faster time to market for our mobile application. So we are now talking about like weeks.
And for a company like ours, doing e-commerce means not having only a very nice front end with a customer experience as optimized as possible, but also to have those front ends to be connected to a lot of backends in real time with all the resiliency that you need, all the performance that you need.
Event-driven architecture enables Vodafone to own the customer journey and provide the best experience for our customer.
We've really been able to connect our business up in a global fashion as such. We've been able to share data across geographies and enable our business to be far more connected than we would have ever been possible without it.
So in many scenarios where the business applications need to talk to each other in real time or near real time,
cost and speed are top of mind for us. So we want to be efficient. So this type of architecture, EDA, plays into that, and making sure that we can move quickly and we can enable our business in the fastest way. So it's actually, it's table stakes, I would say, at this point.
In 2017, when we created Renault Digital, the objective was to generate several 100 million euros of value by 2020, thanks to digital initiatives. And a big part, so it was very challenging, and a big part of this value was generated by the digitization of points of sale or after sales, and for example, providing powerful mobile apps to our dealers brought a lot of value.
But EDA ultimately makes it possible for our customers to leverage the power of events to drive the critical conversations that need to occur. We believe in Slack, and also the lightweight workflows, but ultimately to give them the transparency they need so they can act with confidence. And we often like to say gives them superpowers. So yeah, thanks, Mark.
Well, a big thank you to all of the leaders there for sharing those thoughts on how event-driven architecture benefits their businesses. Next up, to talk about EDA now and into the future, I'm joined by the CEO of Solace, Dennis King. Dennis, welcome. You and I were talking before the session about how EDA has been around for a long time, especially in financial services and betting. So why do you think it's moving now into new industries and becoming mainstream?
Mark, that's a very good question. And, we've been doing event-driven architecture for quite a long time. And as you said, we watched event-driven architecture get its start on the trading floor during the electronification of the trading floor back in the early 90s. And then we watched it move out into, online gaming, online betting. And now what we're seeing is EDA is becoming a key capability for any major enterprise that's undergoing a digital transformation. And so why is this happening, and why is it happening now? Well, the one reason I would say, Mark, is disruption. Look at the major macro trends and disruption happening in our world today. We're just over a year into COVID right now, and look at how much it's changed our industries and what it's doing from a technology point of view. That the retailers alone, because of all of the online shopping, they're driving 4x the volumes today than they did just 1 year ago. Think about what that's happening behind the scenes and through the downstream applications. Look at supply chain and how much is happening in our geopolitical climate and the innovation and drive that's trying to pull all the pieces of supply chain together. Look at pharma, huge industry that's transforming right now, and the vaccines are just driving a big part of that. And then you have climate, both on the climate from a disaster point of view, but from a sustainability point of view. And we're seeing lots of innovation and technology shifts to help make this world a better place from a climate and sustainability point of view. That driving to and from work is the largest emission generator in the Western world right now. So just innovations around work from home. We're seeing more acquisitions of electric cars. We're seeing solar power, wind power being heavily invested in. And this is all technology shifts that are driving a more sustainable environment for us. And then we have business models. Look at the Uberification of the taxi industry. Look at how connected cars changing how auto manufacturers work. And now we're moving toward autonomous cars and what that could mean from a business model. Think about the connected home and all of the different components of that. And so we have these major macro trends that are causing massive disruption in the technology world. And underneath all of this, what we're really seeing from a technology advancement point of view is a massive acceleration of digital transformation by 10 years. We know that. We're seeing a big shift toward cloud. Cloud's been going on for quite some time, but we're seeing it accelerate faster now than ever before. And as people look at their systems, there's just this need for real-time information more now than ever before. And if we're going to accomplish any of these digital transformations, there's a need for application connectivity at a scale we've never seen before. End-to-end supply chain, end-to-end factory pharma. This is all about application connectivity. And so at the heart of all of this is event-driven architecture. As we look at these disruptions, as we push through these disruptions, event-driven architecture is really at the core to help events become the lifeblood of these organizations. And we believe it's just getting started, and it's so exciting to be a part of this journey, and we can't wait to see how far and broad and wide event-driven architecture can actually become.
Dennis, thank you for that. So if EDA is becoming mainstream, it would probably be good to be able to explain it simply. So for that, I turn to some of the other experts we have participating in this event. And I asked them how they would explain event-driven architecture to someone much less familiar with this stuff, to, say, a grandma. So here's their attempt to explain EDA to a grandma.
So how would I explain event-driven architecture to my grandma? First, very slowly and loudly, because she's quite hard of hearing.
Oh, really?
Okay, good. I'm glad you liked it. You're going to be an expert in event-driven architecture.
That's an interesting one. How would I describe it to my grandma?
You give me a second on this one.
So if I have to explain event-driven architecture to my grandmother, we'll really know it's jumped the shark.
Answer probably shouldn't contain finite state machine.
You get a phone call, and maybe you're probably using email. My grandmother's using email.
So we take her to her favorite liquor store, and she's going in to buy her favorite bedtime scotch.
The game gets canceled. and a notification goes out and tells everybody and all the parents from all the kids, it's like, listen, no game tonight. We'll let you know what's going on tomorrow.
She likes to go look and shop. And so she gets there and this is very exclusive whiskey and it's not available.
And then I'd start off with potentially the differences between telephones and mail.
The actual canceling of the game is the event.
So what if she had a magical service which could deliver her ingredients for the next meal on the thought of it?
Wants to send a letter from A to B. So what we're doing is we collect this letter, we travel across all the oceans and the land and deliver it.
Because if I'm not here when she tries to call me, she's just, everything just fails. But with event-driven architectures, there's a decoupling. So we can send mails to each other.
We are not looking inside of the parcels, obviously. So, and if it's a small parcel or a large one,
just think of magic that tells you what grandpa likes for dinner without asking, like that.
Where had we had a proper event-driven architecture, the first store would have said, hey, we're out of stock and it's no longer being replenished. Sorry, Grandma, here's an alternate whiskey that's $300 more that we can sell you. How's that for on the fly?
But let's be fair, that's slow and reactive at the moment. And so I'd probably start talking about new messaging capabilities so I can interact close to real time. But my grandma's not going to understand that, so I'll probably just give up on that one.
So Dennis, we just heard some great attempts to explain EDA to a grandma, and I'm sure that we're all taking away some useful anecdotes. But let me ask the easier question. How would you explain EDA to a colleague, to someone that's closer to it?
Well, Mark, that's a very interesting question because I've been doing event-driven architecture for a very long time. And whenever something's newer in the market, you start to get a lot of interest from a lot of different parties that are going through their own digital transformation. And then you see this struggle for people trying to understand, well, what is this thing called event-driven architecture and how can it really impact my business? And as you've heard here today, there's lots of different definitions, there's lots of different jargon and technical definitions and points of view. But really, in its most simplistic form, event-driven architecture is how software applications or systems can communicate with one another in a completely decoupled, real-time way. That might sound super simple, but it's not the way of the world today. It's not how the systems are developed in most enterprises today. Today, we see a lot of polling for information and a lot of batching up information and passing it on at some time later. And that's just not good enough anymore. And event-driven architecture is really trying to change that paradigm. And so what makes up an event-driven architecture? Well, again, keeping it very simple, there are producers that produce events. So think of a purchase order occurring or a sensor on a vessel in a container that's emitting an event. These are producing applications that are generating events in real time. And on the other side, we have subscribers or consuming applications that subscribe to the events they care to receive in real time. And then those events are pushed out to those consuming applications in real time. At the center, we have this thing called an event broker. And the event broker is where the producers and consumers connect in. And the broker does just what it says. It brokers events. It routes, it moves the events in real time, it decouples the producers from the consumers, it maintains order, and it also guaranteed delivers as producers and consumers come on and offline. And so it has a pretty important job to do. But that's really what event-driven architecture looks in its most simplistic form. Now let's blow that up a little bit. If we go into a massive global enterprise who's trying to make events the lifeblood of their organization, which is what we're seeing more and more, now you're talking about tens of thousands of applications. And these tens of thousands of applications could be distributed worldwide across 20, 30, 40 different major data centers. And these data centers are then a mixture of on-premise legacy world and legacy systems where the system of record still live. There's some component of getting involved in private cloud and different flavors of private cloud. And then of course you have your public cloud, in a lot of cases, multi-public cloud. And so you have all these different locations, and so you have a concentration of producers and concentration of subscribers all distributed around the world. And this is where the event broker then moves closer to the concentration of producers and consuming applications. Just like you moved your application close to the database for better performance back in the day, well, same thing here. You move your event broker closer to the application, but what's different here is the event brokers, they peer together and they form a mesh. That's something we call an event mesh, which is a distributed set of event brokers that are aware of one another and can move events to the right consumers in real time. And so what this allows you to do is producing and consuming applications can move, and you can lift and shift from on-premise to cloud, to private cloud, to public cloud, and they can move around and the streams will find themselves dynamically within this environment. And so once you get to that level of scale, the next thing you need to consider is event management. You need one center of truth for you to define these events, for you to define what producers can talk to what consumers, to define the choreography of the governance of the applications between producers and consumers, and ultimately lifecycle manage your entire event world. And so this is an important layer to complement the event mesh. And last but not least, you need some form of a single pane of glass, an operating center, a mission control, where you can bring the simplicity to EDA that's required to manage all the different runtimes and manage the whole event management environment. And this is sort of the evolution that we're seeing in EDA, and we're seeing it in just about every different industry worldwide. So event-driven architecture is an exciting time. Lots of people trying to figure out what it is. But when you start with the most simplistic view and you move to the more sophisticated view, I think it gets a little simpler to try to understand how this EDA world is and how it's actually evolving.
Dennis, thank you for that overview of what EDA is. Now I'm joined by Keith Guttridge of Gartner. Keith, welcome. At Gartner, you see EDA across hundreds of vendors and customers. Based on that experience, what do you see as the benefits that organizations are going to get when they move to an event-driven architecture?
Sure, Mark. Well, it tends to come in sort of sequences and phases. The first area where they start to see improvement is around resilience. The idea that not everything has to be up at all times to enable the communications to occur properly. But once they start getting to grips with resilience, they then start to recognize some other benefits. So the isolation of the processing components that occur. So each event gets generated, something's going to subscribe to it, it's going to enable to do some processing, might go and publish another event. And every step of that processing can be isolated, which in turn allows them to improve the testing. They can take that isolated component and test it with the inputs and outputs using the producer events and consumer events to ensure that they get the proper performance out of each component and system. The follow-on from that starts to become around the scalability. Once they can recognize that it's relatively easy to provide these isolated processing components, the ease of scaling them up from one to another, allowing more processing units to come through, enables organizations to rapidly scale up beyond what they thought was initially possible. And then following that comes the extensibility. Often people will come through trying to focus their event-driven architecture on solution number one. And this is where they get those earlier benefits. But once they start to recognize the extensibility, the idea that they can add other subscribers without having to change some of these orchestrations, this choreography flows that goes across their systems, it enables them to start to think about new ways to get insight and analytics out of the data that's flowing through those systems.
That's very interesting. Keith, thank you for that. Next up, let's look at event-driven architecture through the lens of two established technology categories, iPaaS and API management. Now, to do that, I'm joined by a panel of industry experts. We have Chris McNabb and Mandy Dhaliwal of Boomi, Vikas Anand of Google Cloud Platform, Martin Bachmann of SAP, and Stefan Sig of Software AG. Welcome to all of you. Let's start with question one to Mandy. Mandy, I know at Boomi you talk a lot about enabling integrated experiences. How do you see event-driven architecture as enhancing or supporting integrated experiences? How important is EDA to this stuff?
Yeah, I think EDA is really right place, right time in the market today, right? You think about consumer expectations, customer experience, right? And you think of everything that's involved in that, from, again, right, I'll use the example of me trying to order something on my phone, right? Having real-time inventory line of sight is critically important, whether that's, I'm purchasing a high-ticket item, a car, online. I need to be able to know there's inventory in the dealership down the road. What happens if it's already been sold? Making sure systems are updated and giving me real-time information whether that's my favorite brand of milk that I'd like to have from the grocery store. It's critically important these days. It's table stakes in the world that we live in. It's event-driven architecture powers those experiences.
Mandy, thank you. Let's move it on to Chris. Chris, what's your perspective on this? How do you see integration or the iPaaS market evolving with EDA? And where do these things come together in your mind?
Well, I think it's really important to understand when we talk about, integration strategy or enterprise integration strategies with our customers and prospects, it really you have to talk about app to app and data integration, EDA, API and API management, EDI, how you do your partner and supply chain. And all of those have to be a part of your strategy. You can't have just one part of that and think it's everything. So EDA plays a critical role in that strategy. And what EDA provides people is an access to much more real-time, sort of asynchronous interaction, things that happen by themselves. When events go off, I want something to occur in its simplest form. And that's what EDA brings to your integration strategy. And it's a critical piece to have a holistic enterprise integration strategy, no doubt.
Chris, great perspective. Thank you so much. Stefan, what's been your experience with this at Software AG? What are the use cases that you're seeing where EDA and event-driven integration is becoming increasingly important?
So let me give you some examples. So from our customer base, for example, Schindler, a major player in elevators and escalators. So there we have a huge, adoption of both IoT and integration for a, let's say, very focused condition monitoring and predictive maintenance scenarios. So, well, I know that, these terms, condition monitoring, predictive maintenance, they come all over the place in the context of IoT. But this is a reality here. So we are equipping thousands and thousands and thousands of those elevators, with our device agent, on a certain gateway on top of the device, on top of the elevator, and enable all of a sudden a central monitoring of the well-being of that machine, and also, of course, optimizing service. Then, we can talk about logistics. DHL, one of our biggest customers, really end-to-end shipment tracking and quality assurance. Well, that doesn't work without events. This doesn't work on data that is 10 times copied and 50 times transformed. Yeah? So obviously, then maybe an example from manufacturing. We have in Germany a lot of manufacturing companies from the machinery space, and a lot of them are called hidden champions because nobody knows, or only few people know the company brand, but they are world market leader in what they do. For example, Dürr, they are producing robots for car painting in the car manufacturing industry. And there we have really deployed a solution for real-time avoidance of scrap. So the system is, helping, the customers of Dürr to avoid that, for whatever reason, a car gets wrongly painted. In the past, that has been done by a human being. It has been checked by a human being at the very end of the painting process. And obviously, if he or she is detecting something, then already 5 or 7 or 10 chassis have already been wrongly painted. And of course, you want to avoid that. So you want to really cut it down to maybe 1 chassis, maybe even 0, if you apply predictive methods. And this is also being done right now. So just 3 examples of what we are doing, and you clearly can see this is going into a new world of integration, of API management, of events, and IoT. And it's very exciting to see that software applications are on a way to be reborn, maybe even on top of a new breed of data. Yeah. And that is complementing the world of HR and finance and CRM. Yeah.
Stefan, great examples, thank you. Martin, let me turn to you. I am curious to hear your point of view on all of this. How do you see EDA intersecting with integration? And maybe more specifically, how does EDA relate to or inform SAP's integration strategy?
Thanks, Mark, for the question. So very good question. So integration plays a key role at SAP. So if you look at, for example, the publications from our board member, Christian Klein, who himself released an integration paper, shows that our customers are expecting these type of things from SAP. So that's part of our DNA. And integration has various aspects. So of course, event-driven will not solve everything with regards to integration, but it plays a more and more important role, and therefore we are continuously embedding event-driven architecture patterns in all our integration activities. So you find it in more and more products, you find it in more and more end-to-end scenarios, and in more and more tutorials talking about this topic.
And about this SAP event mesh that I've heard about, Martin, how does that relate to these complex integration scenarios that we're talking about?
So very good question. So customers are expecting end-to-end integration for all our services, acquisitions, own developed new services, and so on. And our service, the SAP Event Mesh, is an important building block of that. Of course, it will not solve everything with regards to integration. So we have this integration suite, which is the larger umbrella of that, but the SAP Event Mesh is solving everything that is related to a resilient architecture with regards to, especially in the hybrid scenarios where we send over from our ERP solutions, from S/4HANA, ECC, the data over to the cloud. So for all these aspects, we are using the SAP Event Mesh, and which is part of the integration suite. So it's part of our integration story in general.
Martin, thank you. Fascinating to get your perspective on this and to understand how the SAP integration suite is evolving to really incorporate event-driven architecture. I'd like to turn now to the subject of EDA and APIs and API management. Vikas, what is your perspective on how EDA is intersecting with this well-known technology space?
I think events and APIs, it's a very common element of architectures that we see, modern architectures that we see, both in existing customers as well as I think a viewpoint from an architecture for the future. For instance, many of our retail customers have apps that need to receive events from logistic providers. So they use Apigee to provision these topics and subscriptions in order to extend the core tenets of API management, onboarding, discovery, documentation, security, etc., to EDA. Another scenario that we are seeing there are certain patterns which are very well suited for EDA. For example, when there's an API data that has to be sent to multiple backends, EDA is a perfect fit. It could be something which is published to a queue in the back, and then it can be sent to multiple backends. So we're seeing this almost on a regular basis now as a part of the architecture.
Vikas, thank you. Very interesting perspective. It's certainly in line with everything that we've been hearing so far, that EDA is becoming it's a common element of API architectures. Vikas, let me ask you something else. How do you see Google Apigee's API management evolving in regards to EDA?
So I think, at a high level, I believe that there is a need to provide a sort of a management layer, discovery layer for EDA by applying the best principles of API management to the EDA world. I'm not trying to say that we're trying to build a new EDA platform as a part of Apigee, but think about bringing the best principles of API management to EDA world, where we can enable developers with a sort of a portal for discoverability, formal onboarding of developers, providing rich analytics around events, authorization and authentication as the key ways for enabling our customers to extract more value from their EDA systems. And beyond that, I believe there's more value to aggregate event streams for analytics for purposes of ML modeling, as well as building real-time analytics. Obviously, this is an area of interest for us. And of course, as thought leaders in the market around API management, we have a unique viewpoint on how we want to bring this best principles of APM to the EDA world. Now, the broader question about Google Cloud, Google has some native products such as PubSub, Cloud Data Flow that help customers build EDA systems natively in Google Cloud. Additionally, we also have a number of marketplace partnerships which enable third-party EDA solutions on Google Cloud. Beyond this, we've started to weave an events fabric into Google Cloud, which we call as Event Arc. It's a unified eventing architecture and experience in Google Cloud, sending events to Cloud Run from more than 60 cloud sources. Of course, customers have choices when they come to GCP to use PubSub Cloud Data Flow, but also a rich set of third-party marketplace partnerships which enable them to use any EDA solution on GCP.
Well, a big thank you to Vikas there, and of course to our entire panel. To round out the keynote right now, I'm joined once again by Dennis King. Welcome back, Dennis. Dennis, where do you think EDA is going?
Mark, that's a very good question, and it's one that I think about quite often. Event-driven architecture has been around for quite some time, but the momentum and the excitement and the energy around EDA today is greater than I've ever seen before. And really what I think is going to happen is we're going to see event-driven architecture become a mainstream buying pattern for any major enterprise who's trying to modernize, who's going through their digital transformation, and ultimately trying to become more of an agile, real-time business. And the way in which we think that's going to happen, like with any industry, we'll start to see the maturity of the tools, the environments, the different flavors of Kubernetes, how we deploy in the cloud. But we'll also start to see a shift towards simplicity in EDA. And we think that's going to happen through the platform. And we'll also start to see system integrators start to embrace EDA more often. I think we're seeing it already in a lot of the major GSIs. But as you all know, system integrators drive massive solutions into the enterprise. And once they start building out their practices and starting to embrace EDA as a first-class citizen, we'll start to see that maturity curve really accelerate. And so how do we think this is all going to happen? Well, I think it's already happening. And I think you can see it in a lot of the existing tech trends that we see today. If you look at any digital enterprise and anyone who's trying to modernize, you'll see that API-led is a big part of the strategy. And we all know as we look deeper into the API management space, restful communication and synchronous communications is just not enough anymore. And we're already seeing events and EDA playing a significant part and asynchronous communication playing a significant part in the API management space. If you look at integration, orchestration and centralized integration is just not good enough. When you have an enterprise with events that are being generated, thousands of them around the world, how events get into the integration strategy is a key component of that digital transformation. And we're already seeing that happening. We're seeing it in a lot of the major iPaaS that are embracing events as a part of their capabilities. Microservices, we're seeing more and more monoliths being broken up into multiple different services. And not only different services, but having their own databases within those services. And how that is going to evolve with just a RESTful services approach is not very good. So we're starting to see events and triggering on events within the microservices environment starting to happen. And last but not least, Internet of Things. It's been around for quite some time. And we're starting to see finally the shift towards, polling of sensors, but more of an event-driven or emitting of an event from a sensor, which is really natural in sensors anyway. Sensors were designed to generate events, and that's what we're starting to see. So you take these major tech trends that are already embracing event-driven architecture, and I think that's what's going to ultimately pull EDA across the chasm into this mainstream buying pattern. And effectively, EDA will become an IT imperative for any major digital transformation going forward.
Dennis, thank you for that. It is exciting to see, as someone who is absorbing a lot of this for the very first time. I'm really inspired by where this seems to be going and the value and the impact that these technology and architectural patterns can have for businesses, for customers, and for innovation. This seems to be the beginning of a big leap forward. But I still think we have some work to do in explaining this clearly to people who are perhaps not in attendance today, to people who aren't close to this stuff at all. In fact, to Grandma. And even though our expert attempts to explain EDA to Grandma were pretty good, I think we could take it up a notch. So I just went straight to the top. Let's all just watch and learn.
Okay, am I on? Is this working? Can you see me? Oh, I guess it's working. Okay, here goes. So, Mark, event-driven architecture is a software pattern in which decoupled applications can asynchronously publish and subscribe to events via what's called an event broker. And of course, the key benefits to EDA for modern applications and microservices is increased scalability, agility, and resiliency. But of course, isn't this just common sense in this modern day and age? Okay, now how do I get off of here? Okay, I mean, I have stuff to do. I have important things to do that use actual brain power. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Well, a big thank you to all of our speakers and special thanks to Grandma, of course. Bit of housekeeping now before you move on to your next session.